Of course, for those who don't know, last Tuesday, so I guess maybe it would have been 2 Tuesdays ago, depending on how you count that. Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, removed by the House of Representatives from what I can tell, all Democrats voted to remove him, and 8 Republicans joined. First time in history that such a vote has yielded successful results against the Speaker. From my understanding, at the first time such a vote has occurred. And as many of you have probably seen in the news when this has been brought up, and it's something that has been said, this plank for any member to be able to bring a vote of removal against the Speaker was a specific condition by those in, I believe the correct name is the Freedom Caucus, who mandated their votes as one of their concessions. That's something that the Speaker had to include as a possibility. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I expect you to believe me on this necessarily. I can't provide proof on it, but I remember back in January when this had first taken place, I predicted then that this would happen, that Kevin McCarthy would be removed from office at some point based on that plank. I didn't expect it to happen before even halfway through this Congress, but it turns out it happened, so that's something, I guess. But anyway, beyond that, and this isn't going to be a political discussion necessarily. I could care less about telling you who to vote for and what policies to support. I'm more just talking about the general news of it all. From what I can tell, yesterday it was made official. The Republicans and the Democrats chose their nominees for the new Speaker, for exactly who they will be voting for, or at least who the party's official nominees will be when the vote takes place for the new Speaker. That is, the Democrats chose House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. I apologize, I may very well be saying that incorrectly. This was not really surprising from what I can tell. He was expected to be voted in. And the Republicans, it was a bit harder to decide because the two, I guess it's a bit of an oversimplification to say there's two factions of the Republican Party and that's it. But from what I can tell, at least what's considered the more moderate end chose Steve Scalise, House Majority Leader, and what's considered the more Trump end chose Jim Jordan, who is just a congressman from Ohio, I believe. I don't think he holds any higher title than that. Besides maybe, of course, most members of the House serve on committees of some sort, so I don't have those exactly correct. So from this point on, now that Scalise and Jeffries are the nominees, the question is, who will be voted in as the official new Speaker when the vote is held? My first question on this is, I do not understand exactly why it has taken so long to get to this. From what I had already brought up, it's been well over a week since McCarthy was voted out of power. We have not had a Speaker for well over a week now. And I know that the Speaker, that was the highest-ranking member of the government. I guess the closest thing to that would, be the president. In fact, not even the closest thing to that. The president is just the highest-ranking member of the American government. But it seems like a bit of a long time to not have what is considered the highest-ranking member of Congress. He's third in line from the presidency. Not that really holds much weight anymore, considering the fact that the president can appoint a new vice president if the vice president dies, resigns, or is removed from office, or if the president dies, resigns, and is removed from office, leaving the vice presidency vacant. So, maybe 100 years ago, the Speaker would have been a serious contender for the presidency, but now, unless, I guess, the president and the vice president are both assassinated at the same time, God forbid, this really holds not much weight, but it's a technicality, of course, that the Speaker of the House is third in line for the presidency, something that's brought up quite a bit, but of course, at this point, I guess that's just superseded. Or it may be the president pro tempore of the Senate who's third in line. I just know that the Speaker, at least in the House of Representatives, is the highest ranking in terms of who will be next for the presidency. But beyond that, you'd think that this vote could have been gotten to maybe the day after McCarthy was removed. I don't see really the point of why it took so long. It seems kind of a waste of time, especially, and of course they didn't know this at the time, but with what's going on right now, the situation in Israel especially, I feel like there's so much happening in the world, a very turbulent time, and you'd think that it would be a priority to make sure that House leadership is properly constructed, that everyone is in their role, but I guess not. And of course, as I mentioned, they didn't know that was going to happen at the time, but it's very important now that it is happening. It's something that we need to consider, that, a very high-ranking member of the government is the seat is vacant, so maybe it would have been something to consider. And beyond that, I believe the government is, unless there's another funding bill passed, 34 days away from shutdown. Again, and by again, of course, I don't mean the government hasn't shut down since I believe it was 2019 the last time, which isn't maybe a great record for the last time the government shut down. Only about 4.5, 5 years ago was when it happened, but that's still not a great track record. That it has happened, and it's been very shortly since we were last under threat of government shutdown. I mean, it seems that if the threat of a government shutdown happens, when does it not happen? I mean, I guess it happens all the time. But beyond that, though, getting back to the main point to get to with McCarthy's removal here, it seems like when we're in a matter of about a month before the government shuts down again, it might be a good idea to get to voting in a new speaker, maybe the next day if possible. And of course, I think a logical rebuttal to that, or maybe not logical, but just the natural rebuttal to that is, well, the Republicans and the Democrats needed time to pick their nominees. They need time to pick who would be representing them. I don't think that's necessarily something they needed to do, because Kevin McCarthy was the official Republican nominee, and who brought the motion to vacate the office? A Republican. Who's to say that? I feel like realistically, Steve Scalise is going to have to agree to a similar deal to get voted in as speaker. I mean, I won't say for sure that'll happen. I mean, it could very well not happen, but I think that very likely for him to get voted in, for him to get those who supported Jordan to vote for him. Not all of them, of course. I mean, I believe it was something about 20 Republicans voted to support Jim Jordan, and it might not have been 20. I just know that when I looked at the official vote totals, Steve Scalise was not up to in the 200s, and I believe at the moment there were 217 voting Republicans who chose who their nominee would be. That's not the entire Republican majority, obviously, but that's how many voted on who the nominee would be. If that's the case, then there must have been at least 18 defectors. Maybe I shouldn't call them defectors, but defectors from the majority to vote for Jordan. So in that case, I believe that he was the more appealing candidate to someone like Matt Gaetz. So I imagine Steve Scalise may have to make a similar concession. So who's to say this won't just happen again? No one. I mean, it's hard to say if it won't happen again. But at the same time, I feel like, what's the point of having these nominees when a Republican could bring the motion to vacate? And of course, the majority of the votes to vacate the office for McCarthy were Democrats. But a Republican could very well bring a motion to vacate. And what could, from that point on, what's the point of having nominees? I mean, it's their own party. Members of their own party don't even support the nominee. And of course, with any political leader, you'll see members of their own party not supporting them. But bringing a motion to vacate, that's a historic motion. So I feel like choosing the nominees is relatively pointless, especially considering the fact that an article I read earlier today from NBC News had brought up that there is concern, not from who exactly I don't remember, and I don't want to misattribute anyone, that Steve Scalise doesn't have the votes necessary to get him a majority in the House. I mean, if those who voted to remove McCarthy from power vote against him, then he definitely doesn't. There is no argument against that. If all of them vote against Steve Scalise, then he won't be able to be the speaker. But the question is, if he won't become the speaker, then who exactly would be the most likely candidate? Hakeem Jeffries, possibly. To me, there's very little doubt that he is, in my opinion at least, most likely to win not the majority, because that would imply he would become the new speaker, but the plurality of votes in the first round. And that's not necessarily because, of course, Republicans have the majority in the House, but the Democrats will be voting as a block for Jeffries. I was actually very surprised to see 100% of Democrats voted for him as the nominee in the House. And, of course, it's not uncommon to see one political party follow the leader for their party and just say that's who they'll be voting for. So I'm not at all surprised by that. He would get the majority, but, out of something, I believe the Democrats at the moment, and if I was to think about it for a second, have about 213 members of the House of Representatives. 100% of them, from my knowledge, voted for Jeffries. So if the vote was held today and we just had the vote of no one has to get a majority, it's just a plurality, Jeffries would have been the speaker, which would have been a very interesting historical moment to see a Democrat become the speaker of the Republican House of Representatives. What does that mean? I don't think much. I don't think that means necessarily that he's going to be, just because the speaker is a Democrat, is going to be able to change much in terms of the trajectory of a Republican-controlled House. But at the same time, it still would be an interesting historical moment. I don't believe it would be the first time in history that a member of one party has been the speaker while the other party controls the House. In fact, I know for a fact there have been times, and this is long ago, before the era today, where every day it looks more and more likely we'll be in another civil war at some point. But this was during a time when bonds between parties were more common. But at the same time, it would be the first time in many years that this would happen. I think that's a very interesting historical precedent we would set. So I guess the question is, who will become the next speaker? I think that Hakeem Jeffries, honestly, I would say he doesn't have the worst chance at this point. I won't, place any bets that he'll become speaker. And I was completely misinformed during the first House Speaker race when I thought that when he got the plurality of votes, that would just mean he was the new speaker and he would control the Republican House. I was not very educated on that. In the past 9 months, I've become a lot smarter, I guess, a lot more wise in the political process. But I was quite surprised to see that didn't happen. But I guess it doesn't come as too much of a surprise. I mean, the reason we have the Electoral College, or at least one reason, is so a candidate can win the majority of the vote in some area, instead of just choosing the candidate who has the plurality, which sometimes the popular vote would lead us to do. But I guess the point I'm making with this whole piece, the main point is, at the end of the day, what does this affect? I mean, at the end of the day, all the same bills will most likely still be proposed from the Republicans. From what I can understand, and if I'm wrong on this, I'll have to be corrected, but I don't believe the Speaker of the House has the veto power the President has when a bill comes to their desk. It's not like a Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, would be vetoing all these Republican bills that pass with a majority in the House. It's not like there'd be any change in that area. So what does any of this matter? What was the point of removing Kevin McCarthy in the first place? I mean, great, he's not in office anymore. That was the goal of removing him. So, good job. It's succeeded. But, unless that, I know that, as I mentioned before, our Republican brought this to pass, Matt Gaetz. Of course, the Democrats voted for it. I mean, it's not like a big surprise that happened. But, what was really the point of removing Kevin McCarthy when the House is the same? It's not going to change at all. But yeah, I guess the main point I'm trying to make is that it seems maybe this is a historical moment. The first time a Speaker of the House has been voted out of office, from my mind, not the first time this vote has been brought, but the first time they've been voted out of office. And after a historical event like this, you'd think something might change in the House. Looks like that's not going to happen, but, if there's anything we've learned from the past, I don't know, 8 years of political discourse, don't count anything as something that can't happen, and I won't. So we'll just have to see what happens. And if, I don't know how far this radio signal passes, but if somehow by chance anyone who's not American listens, we are in one of the most northern states in the country, so I guess we have a better chance of non-American listening to this than, say, Kansas, or non-American citizen, I guess I would say. If somehow, the signal travels to Canada or something like that, I apologize, first of all, this segment was completely unrelatable to you, but I guess maybe now you've gotten into a look of a little bit of our politics and what I guess we consider to be a good use of about a week now. So that's something to be paying attention to, everyone. Make sure that whenever this next House vote happens and they finally decide on a new speaker by, I guess it would be ballot, 35 or something like that, considering how many it took to get Kevin McCarthy in. Be sure to look forward to who our new fourth or third in line from the presidency, who will never actually get the presidency, will be.